Good evening, everyone. We are going to call the City of Deltona City Commission Workshop for Monday, June 13th, 2022 to order. May we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Bradford? Here. Commissioner King? Here. Commissioner McCool?
Here.
Commissioner Ramos?
Present.
Commissioner Sosa?
Here.
Vice Mayor Villa-Vasquez?
Present.
Mayor Hersberg?
Here. Now, may we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner King, would you like to lead us? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, this evening, like the next 2 evenings after this, we will be having one item on the agenda, budget. So thank you to everyone who came out, all directors, staff members. Try not to make this too painful. Mr. Peters, it's all yours.
Yes, ma'am. First of all, I'd like to thank the Finance Department, in particular, Keong, Julia, and Mary Lyson for their work on the budget. I think it's important to note that we're one of the few cities that are presenting our budget this early. And it's a testament to all the people in the Finance Department and our department directors and staff for putting together the budget in such a timely manner. If you go to tab number 1, the very first sheet, I wanted you all to have this sheet because it's important to understand. And this is a compilation of all of our fund balances. And we have a total of $53,913,346 fund balance as of September 30th, 2021. The natural disaster fund is 8.645, and that is to handle events such as the hurricanes and what have you. This was set up by the Commission a number of years ago. It increases each year by the CIP. Concern we have is, while 8.6 million sounds like a lot of money, when it comes to responding to a natural disaster, such as in the past, I'm not sure there's actually enough money. So we would probably have to dip into our undesignated reserves until we can get money back from FEMA. And unfortunately, sometimes that's years rather than months. So we have to be prepared to respond. We have an operating reserve. This is a 2-month cash flow, which is $7.238 million. We have an economic development. For economic development projects, $525,600. We have a grant match of $378,500. We have capital outlays and projects. This is the reserve for the equipment replacement, park projects, and city building improvements, $2.466903. We have what we created this last year, which is the economic emergency reserve, so that if we have a recession. Ms. Hooper had told me before she left that the area under the curve between 2007 and present, if you drew the amount of revenue we're getting now is about equal to 2007. So when we dropped and then slowly came back up at about 3% a year, that whole area under the curve is the amount of revenue that we lost during that period. The actual number is 22.9 million. I calculated. When we get to that chart in a few minutes, I will explain that in more detail. So just remember, while we have set aside $12 million for an economic downturn, if it was something similar to the last one we had, it's still not enough. So that total is $31,254,003, which gives us an unassigned fund balance as of September 30th of $22,616,368. The next chart, we have a series of 3 charts, and I'd like to explain a little bit for you. We put our budget together. We have gone through them. I have cut a number of things from various department requests. So we have a budget that we're comfortable with at this point. So what we did is we took that budget and then we projected it over a 5-year period so that when you look at rollback, what the current rate is, and then something in between, we can see at the end of the 5-year period what kind of reserves we have. The chart up there, I believe, is on 7.85. Is that right? You see the number up there? 7.25? Okay. 7.25 is, the rollback is basically 6.95. The current rate is basically 6.85. So we took a number about 2/3 away between current and rollback. That's 7.25. You will note that the projected end of year fund balance for this year is going to be $15.8 million. It continued to decline to the 5th year where we will end up with $6.132 million. That's a significant reduction. If you go to the next chart, which is 6.8957, which is rollback, we start out at the same 15.8 million, and we drop very precipitously to the point that by year 5, we are in the hole 1,288,704. What this is telling you is, as we review the budget, if you have a desire to go to rollback, basically you're going to have to come up with essentially $3 million a year in order to maintain a fund balance like we have. So that's a significant amount of money that would need to be trimmed out of the budget in order to do a fiscally responsible rollback. It's easy to say, let's go to rollback this year, but you need to remember, once you go down to 6-point-something%, in order to go up enough to get you out of a hole later, it could conceivably require a 100% vote from the commission. All 7 commissioners would basically have to say, we are in an economic emergency and we need to go to a higher rate. And so therefore, this is not a fiscally responsible plan. If we can find $3 million a year, then that would make it fiscally responsible. I'm here to tell you I don't believe that's possible without dramatically impacting the services that we provide to the citizens. To put in perspective for you, the typical full-time equivalent employee with benefits is about $70,000. To make up $2.1 million, we would require cutting 30 employees a year, each year, to where by year 5, we would have essentially 120 employees less than we have now, which is about 350. So that would be a dramatic decrease in staffing. The last chart is the current millage rate of 7.85, and you see that we pretty much stay consistent for the first couple of years, and then it actually increases. So that's telling me that over time, that may be too much revenue. So the 4th chart that staff just did for me this afternoon, did not have time to review it and share with you, and that is a 7.55. And I can just tell you that very quickly, based on the numbers they gave me, we started 15.8, and we end the 5-year period at 12.3. So it's not a large decrease, but that is a manageable number, especially projecting over 5 years. So that would probably, if I was going to say right now, that would be the millage rate that we would recommend when we're said and done. As we go through the budget, by Wednesday, we will have that particular chart available. What I want to do is go through each department's budget so we can ask the hard questions. And then by Wednesday, we will be able to revisit this chart, and hopefully there will be consensus from the commission as to which millage rate we want to move forward with in terms of finishing up the budget.
Commissioner Bradford?
Okay, a couple questions, Mr. Peters. One, going back to the first page, how much would you suggest that you increase the natural disaster by and the economic emergency reserve? Do you have a suggestion on those?
Mary?
And then when she's coming up as well, your charts are great. My question is, over the next few years, as you projected, you didn't take into consideration the ad valorem revenues increasing. So do we have a anticipation of how much those ad valorem, the revenues are going to be increasing each year? Because generally there's a standard. Right now, I know we're drastically above it, but I would like to see taken into account what standard rates are.
Yeah, my error. I meant to tell you a couple key factors that the budget is based on. The first one is 3% revenue growth each year. That is pretty much what Homestead has. Now, mind you, saying that, if we, God forbid, go into a recession, we will actually see decrease in revenues over time. So that's first. The second is there is a presumption in this budget that we will carry through with the rental ordinance. The way the budget's set up is that rental ordinance would go into effect in 24-25. We could, in fact, move it up to where it could go into effect 23-24. That is roughly, with expenses, roughly about $1.5 million a year. So if we were to do the rental ordinance, go into effect on 23-24, that would add about $1.5 million to those fund balances going out starting in 23-24. So that will help some. But the presumption is that there will be a rental ordinance, and if we don't do the rental ordinance, that would have basically 3 years and $1.5 million, $4.5 million impact on those last fund balances at the end of the 5-year period. So that's a major assumption there. We've had some discussions about it, and I think generally it's been consensus that that's the direction we want to head. So those are the two key things that are presumptions in the budget: 3% revenue growth and a rental ordinance by 24-25.
Where is that 3% revenue growth at?
Mary?
Because when I look at it going all the way across, it appears to be the same number.
Can you turn your mic on, please, Mary?
Okay, it's not included in the ad valorem line. However, I think it's included in the non-ad valorem as part of the percentage of increase. But to address your question on the natural disaster, that is tied to the consumer price index. And with inflation and this current state that it is, that this number could conceivably grow quite exponentially. I wouldn't personally increase it. Especially if the city continues to have a strong fund balance. We generally have the funds available to cover the cost of debris removal and hurricane costs. And then so far FEMA has been very good about reimbursing us. So really it serves the purpose as like a short-term loan that we can do pay as we go instead of having to reach out to a third party and pay financing costs. So this might even, well, it's hard to know. It's hard to predict how many hurricanes. I mean, we never thought we were going to have 3 or 4 right in a row either, because we had 20 years of none. So it's a good conservative number to keep it. We might want to think about maybe having it tied to CPI if inflation is going to continue to grow. The second question you had on emergency economic reserve, that's another sort of, nobody has a crystal ball. I think this is a good conservative number. I don't think I would increase it.
Is that okay, Commissioner Bradford? Commissioner McCool?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mary, being tied to the CPI there, we talked about, we were good at 8 million, right? Right?
That might be sufficient.
Okay. And along with, how many years have we rolled over the Economic Development Fund?
Actually, this is the first year.
Okay.
Or the economic development.
Yes.
Can we hold on a minute, because I thought we were going to start having mics for staff over there, because I'm not sure if this is broadcast or recorded, if they can hear Mary.
One.
I'd have to go back and actually look, but I believe it's been about 3 or 4 years since the commission has increased that fund balance. I think maybe Jerry would be a good, we had economic development reserve several years ago for specific projects. And then I think the commission hasn't funded that for specific projects in the last 3 or 4 years. Is that your recollection, Jerry? I'm sorry to make you get up.
Mary is correct. That fund has simply been carried forward for about the last 2 to 3 years without any increase. I have not approached the city manager to increase it at this time. I don't know that we need to increase it at this time.
Yeah, no, I wasn't suggesting that. I just wanted to see how that money moved. And then that is completely, to clarify, that's completely withstanding any of the grant match also, right? That has nothing to do, we can't use any of that for grant match either.
No,
right?
Commissioner, it has nothing to do with
Yeah.
the grant match.
Okay. All right, thank you, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, commissioners? When you're looking at, on the page that you have, when you're looking at your ad valorem revenue for this year, you're looking at 24,923 million, and then 26,655. So that's just a little over a 3% increase, correct? Is that what you're estimating each year? And then the next three are at the same 26,655.
Madam Mayor, the ad valorem we kept at the same rate over the next, up until 2027, but the non-ad valorem has increased.
So the increase from what you have for the actuals for 2021-22, which is 24,923,000, and then for 22-23, you have 26,655. So that's what, a 3% increase? It's a little, 3% I think would be 25,670, so maybe it's a little 3.5%. I'm just curious, because then you're basing the rest of the finances on that 26,655,000. Because that's what Commissioner Bradford was asking,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, but I'm not seeing that.
So I think that we increased it from 22 to 23 based on the taxable value that we received from the property appraiser. And it's as of June 1st, which is preliminary. The final will come on July 1st. So we just stuck with that rate over the next several years. I mean,
Here, what I was coming up with is about 799,000 at 3%, and then it goes up from there. That's what I'm saying. I don't see that 3% revenue increase throughout the whole spreadsheet.
No, it's not. It's only the one time.
that's correct. It's just between 22 to 23.
Yeah, you're doing just about a 3.5% then the first round. Okay. And then you're just leaving it the same. Okay. Commissioner King?
Yeah, Mr. Peters,
And Mary, our budget is based on what we have right now. So these numbers can really change significantly. If we go with a fire assessment, that's going to come out of here, right? It'll go into a fire assessment account, which would be not coming out of our millage rate. It would be coming out of our ad valorem tax somewhere, right?
The fire assessment would basically be a one-for-one removal from the current numbers. It doesn't impact the budget itself. Let's say, for instance, the fire assessment brings in the equivalent of 1.5 mil, then we would reduce this millage by 1.5, but the fire portion of the department will be paid for out of the fire fee. So the total budget would still be the same. It's just how we are funding the fire department through a fee, and we have a corresponding reduction in the millage rate.
Okay, so that money would be coming out, be funded a different way. But then, what about our industrial taxes? People like Amazon, people, we're getting closer to the 5 years every year. That's going to increase, and that's going to be an increase in income for the city, wouldn't it?
Let's take Amazon, for instance. Right now, they pay the taxes, and then we reimburse it back. We have one more year of the 100%. Following that, we have 2 years of 50% return. We've been estimating about $500,000 of new revenue that will come in starting in year, not next year, but the following year. And that would be for 2 years. And then on the 4th year, we would get the full amount, which would be $1 million a year. Right now, we don't have any other industrial that is coming in. We do have a building that has started up. We're hoping that it will be done within the year, and they will have a tenant. So that will have an impact on our future revenues. But it's very difficult to project that at this point. Just as a comparison, Amazon's 1.4 million. The building that they're building is 1 million. So stands to reason that about 75% of the revenue that we get for Amazon will be what we will be getting from this new building. However, we do not know what economic incentives that building may have based on the end user. So it's very difficult for us to project that at this point.
Okay.
I just want to add that on the spreadsheet, the ad valorem revenue from Amazon is in year 25-26. It's 392, and then beginning in 26-27, it's estimated about 800,000.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner McCool, are you done, Commissioner King?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Peters, I'm only like a page 2 ahead, but it's germane to this right here. Did we do any workbooks regarding the valuation, the tax drop, and the property appraiser, what their assessment drop is going to be? Did we do any of that for the mill calculation here? I understand that it's presumptuous at this time, but it's pretty locked in of what that assessment value is going to be from 163 to 73. Did we do any work on that?
My understanding, Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, we will receive a final number from the property appraiser around the 1st of July. Mm-hmm. And then legally, we have to set a maximum rate by the end of July, mm-hmm. So that the trim notice can go out. You're able to go lower on the final budget, but you can't go higher once you set that trim notice. So those are the 2 key dates that still impact this process. We will receive a final taxable value and revenue at the end of this month, 1st of July, and we will make adjustments to the budget accordingly.
And can you tell us fundamentally what that does if that is the true tax value drop? for, as far as what our millage rate, what it does to our millage rate?
Well, under Florida's homestead law, Save Our Homes law, the valuation of individual homesteaded property can only go up 3% a year. It's my understanding, I believe, that non-homesteaded property can only go up 5%. And then I think commercial has a limit also. So we're limited on how much it can grow. You know, I know somebody who's in real estate, and I can tell you that real estate values over this last year have far, far, far exceeded 3%. But we will not benefit from that in terms of revenue. The residents will benefit because their taxes can only go up 3%. Now, for new homes, their first assessment is going to be based on market value. But the reality is, typically, if you look at the property appraiser's website, it appears that they're using, in terms of market value, about 80% of true market value for residential. Interestingly, commercial property is about 60% of true market value based on what I have seen. So there's a disparity there. And you know, I believe, I don't know this for a fact, I do remember at one time those numbers were more like 90, 80. Residential was more about 90% of market value and all that. When the economy crashed and the values went down, there was kind of a shift to a lower ratio of market. And I think that hurt us more because that actually lowered the value of properties even more than it needed to. You know, just think about it. If you went from 90% to 80%, that's 10% difference, and you grow back at 3%, that's 3 years it takes you just to make up for that change in the how the property appraiser appraises property. So, you know, those are some of the things that we're having to deal with. We're going to show a chart in a few minutes, and what you're going to see is our revenue is just now getting back to where it was in 2007.
After 11 years, correct? 10, 11 years it took? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And just to piggyback on that, to your comment that homestead can't go up more than 3% on a homesteaded piece of property, the legislature sets that increase, and this past year was 1.4%. Wasn't even close to the 3. Yep. So it was 1.4%. So, you know, if we hit a snag, they can go lower, which in turn hurts the municipalities because you're not even getting the 3%. Okay. So no one else is on the board to speak right now, so what's next, Mr. Peters?
If we would go to tab number 2, this is the budget overview. The very first chart is the one I was just talking about. As you can see, we fell off a cliff in 2007, and then we slowly started coming back up. Now, what's important to realize here is when we fell off the cliff, I think our millage rate was, Mayor, you can probably help me here, was about 4?
4.25 maybe. I'm going to look it up right now.
So the commission had to have supermajority votes to increase the millage to try to keep up with the revenue. That's part of the reason that our millage rate is at the point it is now. But as I pointed out a few minutes ago, if you drew a line between the current valuation and 2007, that creates a little curve there.
Can we get that slide? I'm sorry, Mr. Peters. Can we get that slide up there for the people? Thank you.
There it is. If you were to draw a line between the upper value on the left and the upper value on the right, it creates an area under the line. And that area equates to how much revenue we lost if we had just stayed straight. And that number, I made a point of calculating it, is $22,908,292 that we lost based on the last recession. We have set aside $12 million in our fund, but as you can see, that's still $10 million short of what we actually lost during the last recession. The scary part is, if you listen to economists, the latest I've heard is a lot depends on what the Federal Reserve does in the next couple months in terms of increasing interest rates. And what they're trying to do is hit what they call a soft landing so that we don't go into recession. The concern is, the number I'm hearing is a 50-50 chance that we will go into a recession. And hopefully it won't look like this recession, but we need to be mindful of the fact that a recession is going to have a negative impact on our overall revenues, so that when we show you something that looks rosy, like $14 million fund balance at the end of each year, that could be taken, a good portion that could be taken away by another recession that's shown in this chart. So I just want you all to have this, to be mindful of what a downturn in the economy means. And given the way Florida works, you have to have certain votes. For instance, to stay at rollback, you just need a simple majority. There's a threshold that you have to have a supermajority, 5-2 vote. And then there's another threshold that you need to have unanimous vote. That's what I call the economic crisis situation. We don't want to get there. What I would prefer to do is a sound budget that keeps fiscally responsible fund balances, so that if we have another 2007, 2008, we will be able to sustain that with having a dramatic impact on our millage rate and our budgets.
Mr. Peters, you asked for the millage rate for the city of Deltona in 2007. It was 3.28. The school board's millage rate at that time was 7.46, and the county was 4.33. I looked on my own property tax bill. At 3.28, I paid $207.61 to the city. At 7.85, I paid $226.08. And if you look at the school, or at the county, is very interesting, because we got devalued 62% in 3 years. The county didn't get devalued that much. The county at 4.33, you paid $273 that year, $274, and now with a 5.38 mil, I only pay, if you add on the extra little thing that they did, $170. So it just tells you the school was 7.46 and I paid $472, and now at 5.8 it's $312. So when you start looking, even if you want to just calculate for the heck of it, look at different cities and look at their millage rates, because they were not as devalued as Deltona, and they were able to keep a steadier. But when you look that we were at 3.28 and we're at 7.85, and for a homesteaded house that entire time, it is a $19 difference, $19 from 2007 to now to 2021. An increase of $19 on a homesteaded property. It's crazy.
The next page is the history of property taxable values. And you can see that there has been an increase there. And then on the following page is history of new taxable value, basically new construction. You can see that a couple of years ago we had a very significant increase. I think that may have been driven by a couple major projects that we had. I have been known to say on a number of occasions that for the city to maintain, we have to have the equivalent of about 3% growth in equivalent residential units. Now, equivalent residential units, you can have enough commercial industrial to offset some residential growth, but we've already talked about the difficulty with commercial growth in the city, given our demographics, the lack of available land, and the lack of utilities to the key property. That's something we're working on, but it's going to take some time to make that land available. It's also going to take time to change our demographics to where we are viewed by site selectors as a viable location for key commercial usage. And then we have a history of our millage rates, and you can see that we've been in the 7.9s, 7.8s, and now we're giving you projections on continuing with either the current rate, 7.25 or 6.95 roughly. By Wednesday, we will have a 7.55 that kind of splits the difference. But you can see that we have maintained relatively consistent millage rate, mainly because of the decrease in value since 2007. Now that we're getting to a point that we're kind of getting back to that value, we can look at maybe reducing our millage a little bit. So we will discuss that more as we go through the budget. And then the next chart is an overview of the citywide budget, revenues and expenditures. I will leave that for you to review at your own leisure. Then we have, what if we shot it? Okay, I got a chart up there on that. The next one I have in my book is the general fund overview. Once again, I will leave that at your leisure. Number of citizens per employee. I think this is a very important graphic. Let me see if it's up on the chart. Okay. The city of Deltona is very lean. If you look at employees per citizen or citizen per employee, right now we're at 223. Palm Coast is at 200. And the higher the number, the more lean we are. Let's make that clear. So we are the highest in terms of 223 residents per employee. Conversely, the land is 105. This is, and Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, this does not include police departments in the other cities.
That's correct, but John, I just want to point out the column to the left is 2021, and then it goes back in time to 2016.
Yes, thank you. So, what's interesting to note is that even with the increase in staffing that we had in last year's budget, our employees, the citizens per employee actually went down. So, we have shrunk that a little bit, but we still are by far the leanest city on this chart. We took the police department out so it would be an apples-to-apples comparison because a lot of people, would put in there the police departments in these other cities and it looks even worse. So this is a fair comparison. And the 22-23 capital request for buildings.
I want to talk now. After this, Commissioner McCool has a question.
Okay.
Mr. Peters, thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. How many budgeted positions citywide do we not have filled? We budgeted for and are not filled.
Rebecca? Rebecca coming up here, I'd like to make a little comment about that.
Sure.
I have been talking to other municipalities. We're actually in very good shape. To give you an idea, Seminole County is approximately 35% vacancies. I talked to the interim city manager in Maitland. They're at 30% vacancies. A lot of our peer cities are really struggling to fill positions. We have done an admirable job filling the position. It's not as quick as we would like. We've had some challenges, but we're working through them. For instance, we will pick somebody to make an offer. We do a background check, find out that there's a history of drug use or vehicle problems, and we end up rescinding that offer. And then by the time we go back to number 2 and number 3, they've already gotten a job somewhere else. So that's one of the struggles that we have. But Rebecca, if you could go through it, list them.
Sure. Good evening. I'm Rebecca Wilk from Human Resources. And currently we have 54 positions that are vacant throughout the city.
What's that percentage, Rebecca? What is our percentage? Do we know what that percentage is?
Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to get that for you out of the total number of positions, but I can probably look that up in our budget book and let you know.
And those 54 are budgeted?
Mm-hmm. That's budgeted positions. And some of them are at various stages of recruitment. So even though they're vacant right now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not positions that we currently have people working through the process on. And then some of them are the positions that are out on the website that we have as current recruitment.
Okay. What is that in human capital dollars? Do you have any idea what that is? It's budgeted for, but...
I did not.
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry.
At your leisure, okay?
Okay.
Because I know that you don't have anything to do. I'm sorry, it's a curiosity. So if you could get that for me at some time, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Ms. McCool?
Yes.
That number represents about 15% of the total staff.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay, no more questions. So you were on the capital requests.
Yes, ma'am.
For help desk.
We have a list of the capital for the city manager's office, for finance, and for IT. Then going to the next page, we continue with IT. Community services and fire department. The biggest ones in the fire department are fire engine replacement and a transport replacement. And then we have the public works department. They have the biggest item there is a dump truck, and the total of all the capitals are $2,674,000. Parks projects. This was a difficult element to work on. As you all remember, we had a presentation back in February showing the conditions of some of our buildings. We elected to hire ABM to come in and do an assessment. They have done their initial assessment for majority of our buildings. The good news is a number of buildings are in better shape than we thought. The bad news is we got some buildings that are in worse shape than we thought. Right now, the recommendation is going to be to remove the building at Campbell Park. When we went in and allowed the former occupants to remove their materials, we found the floor was in worse shape than we expected. To rehab the building would be quite expensive, and we believe the prudent thing to do is to build a new building. The good news is Campbell Park is in the CDBG area, so we could use CDBG funds to help us with reimagining the use of that property. The arts and craft building down at Lakeshore, beyond repair. We have foundation issues and a number of other things, so the recommendation is going to be to remove that building. We will be starting here shortly with removing all the equipment and items that are stored there and taking them to other locations. And then the community building, we just went through a major effort to clean up the mold. We have finally removed the mold that we could find. The concern that ABM expressed was that we cannot get to a lot of the roof structure. Because that roof was essentially open for several years, where water was able to get into under the soffit and the fascia. The concern is that there is wood rot in that location. So we will be doing more evaluation, but I would not be surprised if the recommendation is to remove that building. We are doing a lot of work here at City Hall. Part of the evaluation determined that because City Hall is approximately 20 years old and we had not been doing the maintenance, a substantial number, if not all the windows, the caulking and elastomeric material around the windows are either gone or severely compromised to the point that you can literally in some places put your finger between the wood frame, the window frame, and the building surface. So significant work needs to be done. The good news is, because the rain doesn't go horizontal that often, we do not find that many places where there are mold, but we have found several and we are remediating those locations. The bottom line lesson out of all this is, just like you do with your own house, you have to maintain your property. You can't go 15, 20 years and not do ongoing maintenance. That is lesson learned. That is something that we are changing. And going forward, I can assure you that we're going to do everything we can to maintain our facilities the best that they can be. So with that said,
Commissioner McCool.
I'm sorry, just a bit of housekeeping as we go along, here. Do we have a centralized storage facility? Because I know that we have stuff from every department, right? Do we have any type of dedicated storage department for this stuff?
Ms. McCool, when I was at Public Works, I know you and I had a conversation about my desire to have a central store where we maintain replacement items, toilet paper, whatever. So it's in a central location so we can log it in, log it out, and maintain inventory. In terms of general storage, no, we do not. However, because of our efforts through enhancing our SCADA system, we'll be able to reduce the number of water plants. Right now, we have 2 water tanks that are empty. We have a 200,000-gallon water tank on South Cortland, and then we have I think it's a 1 million gallon or 500,000 gallon tank at Dewey Boxer. They're empty. In previous employees, I have converted a ground storage tank into another use, in this particular case, an IT facility. The beauty of the ground storage tanks is they're practically indestructible. They can survive a hurricane, what have you. I figured out that just on the 200,000-gallon tank with high bay storage like you see in Lowe's and Home Depot, we could get approximately 260 pallets of storage in that facility. And we could inventory it and what have you. So one of our long-term goals is to work on converting those 2 tanks into storage facilities so that we can finally have what I call the company store, where we can, literally, if you break a hammer or you break a shovel, instead of going to Home Depot and buying something, you go to the company store and it's already there. And then they charge it against your account. That's my ultimate goal, and that's what we're working on achieving now.
Okay. With that being stated and having that dedicated, and when we were talking about the budget, when we were talking about maintenance issues, long-term maintenance issues, there seemed to be really not 100% clarity regarding who takes care of what, right? And what I'm trying to find out is, because I know that other municipalities do, have we talked about, or can you tell me about having a dedicated maintenance department for this very thing, because in my somewhat sometimes naive view, right, I'm going to just take what comes first to mind. Parks and Rec. When you talk about Parks and Rec, to me, Parks and Rec should be working, and I'm telling you, I don't do staff, so I'm telling you as a consumer what I think, right, and how people think. Parks and Rec, they should be working on maintaining those facilities, the green, working on programs, how do we generate, you know, more revenue, that kind of thing, as opposed to the maintenance, because the hammer fell hard regarding the state of our buildings there, in which, whatever, that's water under the bridge, and I know that we're moving forward and reimagining and stuff. I'm trying to find out, have we talked about having a dedicated maintenance department, somebody that goes around and takes care of what you're talking about, having a tool crib, having storage area, making sure that there's scheduled maintenance on these buildings, and they specialize in doing that instead of trying to do all these other things? Has that been talked about, or is that an option?
Part of ABM's contract will be to give us a level of standard of care, so that, for instance, air conditioners should be checked twice a year. They at least clean out the filter, make sure they're running properly. When they went through all of our buildings, I believe there were 17 air conditioning units that need to be either major upgrades or replaced. Yep. That is a significant percentage of the total air conditioning in the city. You know, to get to that state, we obviously were not following a standard level of care that I would be comfortable with. But we will be developing those standards. Most operations that I'm aware of, building maintenance is either in the Parks and Rec department or it's in Public Works. And we will be having some discussions as to what's the most appropriate location. I can tell you that since our meeting in February, the level of care that we've been seeing from the Parks and Rec staff on the buildings has increased exponentially. So, you know, we are seeing improvement there, and we will get the standard of care so that, you know, we have annual contracts with AC contractors with a calendar and when they're supposed to do those twice a year inspections and filter change out and what have you. So that is all part of the process. I think I told you all before that, you know, I went through some national standards and developed some spreadsheets, and you know, based on our building sizes and what have you, you know, the number of people in HVAC, the number of people in janitorial staff, the number of painters, and the like. There's national standards on how many you should have for every 100,000 square feet. And we will be applying those standards as to our staffing level. We are also, you know, it's not building maintenance, but it's a key part of our maintenance, and that's mowing. Right now, we have 4 different types of mowing that occurs in the city. We have Parks and Rec, we have Public Works, right away, and we have stormwater. And we have a private contractor. Just to show you how crazy it may seem, on Howland, we have 3 different people mowing on Howland. Steve Danston, his staff, Parks and Rec staff have been working together. They are doing an unbelievable job. They're putting mapping together, showing every piece of property that we mow, who does it. We have already found places where within a quarter mile, we have 3 different entities mowing with the same type of equipment. Well, obviously, there could be efficiency gained by assigning that area to one entity and achieving better results and better utilization of staff. My hope is over time that we will find that this efficiency will allow us to, A, get rid of the private contractor that we're not happy with, I know several of the commissioners are aware of some recent incidents where the private contractor didn't do their work and Public Works had to go out, or Parks and Rec had to go out and do the mowing for them. That's unacceptable. And so the initial efficiency would be to take over the private work. And then over time, I'm hoping that we'll have efficiencies where we can, through attrition, eliminate some more people and reduce city's overall cost in mowing. So I applaud the Public Works and the Parks people and the Stormwater people for working together on a common goal, developing these map books to show every parcel down to the square footage of how much being mowed. And from that information, we will be able to look at national standards in terms of how many people we need to be having out there mowing.
And that is fantastic, and which also helps with transparency, issues. And I will tell you that that I've shared some dashboards with our public, and they like that also. So to be able to see that is really helpful. So thank you for clearing that up. I appreciate it.
Well, and I will also tell you, ma'am, that as soon as we get our website straightened up, my goal is to have those dashboards on the web so that citizens can see it, because I know you all appreciate the information that's in there. If you want to know the status of a project, just look at the dashboard and see weekly what's going on. So our ultimate goal is to get those dashboards out there to where the public can see them and be able to see where we are with specific projects.
And I must reiterate that they appreciate understanding what projects are going on to avoid traffic in those areas, and it's good for transparency. So thank you for doing that.
Commissioner Bradford?
Okay, I'm going to ask this in relation to parks since we're on it, but I also want to ask it as a general for all departments. She already covered the positions. What about equipment and vehicles? Have we purchased the equipment and vehicles that we had budgeted this year yet? I know there's major back orders and prices are going up, so that's a major concern.
We have put purchase orders in. In some cases, if you've been out trying to buy a new car, sometimes you're buying cars that are in transit and you have to wait another month. Guilty here. But we've had that same issue with especially pickup trucks. We're struggling to get them, but we're trying to go alternate routes to find ways of getting them. But in terms of the purchase order being done, yes, we have made the effort. It's supply side right now that is causing us trouble.
Okay, well, that was my question. I just want to make sure we've got these in, because right now, like you're saying on the vehicles, you could be on a 4 to 6 month wait. So, and then as far as equipment goes, that's why I want to make sure we've got all these purchase orders in now so we can kick these in on this budget.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Peters, we're on the park projects.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for getting me back on track here. You will notice that we have we placed the pavilion at Dwight Hawkins for $50,000. We have $70,000 for Timber Ridge Park fencing. Then we have Park Improvement Project, $3 million. What we are planning to do is come to the commission with this year's budget to basically do a budget amendment to not move forward with certain projects that we have in the current budget, mainly the field renovation at Dwight Hawkins, a number of ball field lights, and those type projects that will equate to close to $1 million. And then we identified another $2 million of work that needs to be done to fix the facilities that we've got. And so we're recommending $3 million so that we can start the process of doing the significant repairs that need to be done to some of our buildings, including City Hall. And then on Lakeshore improvements, the plan all along was that while we have what we call the straw project going on, that we would put together a master plan on how we could reuse Lakeshore. And so this $120,000 will begin that process by hiring a consultant, hopefully have community meetings to get input from the residents of the city as to what they would like to see happen at Lake Shore. I personally had some issues with the boat ramp itself. It's extremely steep. It intersects immediately with Lake Shore. There's no gap. So if somebody guns it out of the lake, they're not going to stop before they go across the road. On top of that, there are a lot of pedestrians on the sidewalk just across the road. So it is a very unsafe traffic pedestrian interface. And so we want to look at how we repurpose that boat ramp as we go forward. So the total park improvements are $3,240,000.
Vice Mayor? Vice Mayor had a question, whenever.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Peters, going back to the park improvements project budget, is that going to include the paving of the parking lots for the parks with the making them handicap accessible?
Yes, ma'am. If you remember, just recently, we came to you all with CDBG funding that included a number of things, including paving at Campbell Park. So what we're trying to do is be better utilization of other people's money. Ultimately, they're taxpayers' money. I know Mr. Sosa's thinking. But the reality is, for instance, Campbell Park is in the CDBG area, so it qualifies for using CDBG funds. So we're looking at, what funding opportunities there are. We're doing pavement assessments at the various parking lots so we don't let them get into condition the Campbell Park parking lot is in. And we are looking at all of that as part of this work. For instance, it's my desire that when we do Lake Shore and we look at places like DuPont Park, that we pave these unpaved parking lots. They're highly inefficient. If it rains at DuPont Park, you're parking in a mud puddle. You got beautiful fields out there to recover from a rainstorm pretty quickly, but you can't get in there. So, those are the projects that we need to look at that's going to require stormwater management in terms of some retention for going from unpaved to a paved parking lot. But, all of our park facilities, we need to take a holistic look in terms of, paving, fence replacements, and the like.
Okay, I also remember we spoke about the accessible water fountain in all the parks, the highs and the low ones. Is that also part in this project?
That is part of the work that ABM is doing. If I recall correctly, Mary can correct me, but I think we are setting aside $300,000 for ADA compliance. I can tell you right now, the biggest chunk of that money will go to Veterans Park. We have a parking lot that is virtually impossible for somebody that's using a walker to access from the parking lot into the park. And then once you get in the park, we have significant portions of the sidewalks in there that are over 5% grade. Technically, when you're over 5% grade, you're supposed to have a handrail. In looking at it, I believe that we can reconfigure the sidewalks in there to meet the ADA 5% grade requirement and improve the parking lot to where it's more accessible.
Okay, there's a few parks that need to look at. I know that the parking at the Fireman's Park needs to be looked at. Even Van Park. Van Park is a mess. It rains and, there really has no parking. It's just dirt. So I'm glad that we're going to be taking a look at each individual park. Thank you.
Commissioner Bradford?
Mr. Peters, I think you'll know this as soon as I say it because this is my MO. I hate seeing a blanket number like that. We've got park improvement projects, and we have no outlay of what's being done. Personally, I prefer where we have laid out what we're doing. You know, like we can sit up here and say, oh, it's the water failing, it's the paving, it's this, it's that, but when it comes down to it at the end of the year, we're being held accountable, and then we're gonna be said, oh, it wasn't in the budget. Well, we're gonna assume it was in here, but it's not in here.
Well,
So I hope this gets a little more detailed when we get going.
yes, ma'am. ABM is going through the process of evaluating everything. The goal is to, I believe, in late August, for them to complete the entire list of projects with priorities. And when we do the final budgets in September, those priorities will be reflected in the final budget. I, like you, do not like having placeholders because it looks like that we're just trying to hoard money to do a favorite project somewhere. Nobody knows what it is. So our goal, and we've already confirmed with ABM that they can do it, is we will have a priority list by August that will be included in the final budgets in September.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, to that point, you have your sheet here. Tomorrow, we'll go into Park and Rec park projects and so on and so forth. This is an overview right now, tonight, until we start getting into, I mean, right now, we're still on the overview, as we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 departments to finish up tonight, and we haven't even touched one department yet. So now, the personnel requests that you've approved, that's where we're going right now, right?
Yes, ma'am. The GIS position in planning, this is a position that was on the personnel list, but we did not fund it last year. We are recommending that we fund it this year. As we go forward with the moratorium on residential rezoning and the rental ordinance, and conceivably the fire fee, the need for this GIS position is going to become very apparent because the maps that we need to show you all where all the rentals are and those things come from the GIS department. And so this is critical. As I explained earlier, we've already are maxing out the public works GIS person with the mowing exercise that we're doing. And then we have a utility system tech flusher. Technically, this is an upgrade of an existing positions, plural. As part of our licensing with DEP, we have to flush certain lines in order to ensure that we have adequate chlorine level in the lines. This is absolutely critical for safety. In addition, the flushing is a key part of our fire department ISO requirement because we have to test the fire hydrants all through the city, I believe on a semi-annual basis every 2 years. So the flushers are extremely important to get that process going. You will note that unless, like last year, we do not have a significant number of new employees. I just want to point that out. The personnel request not recommended. The first 3 are in the fire department. 2 of them were Lieutenant Administrative Fire Training, Lieutenant Administrative EMS Training. We have evaluated that, and we believe that there are more efficient ways of achieving the same goal. And so we're taking a good, hard look at that. And then there were 6 firefighters for the tune of $333,000. Just want to point out that the more accurate on that would have been paramedics. This was 6 people to take over another transport. The county had indicated the next one that we would be allowed to take over is the one out on Fort Smith. It is probably the least producing in terms of revenue, so that we would take a significant hit. We are in contact with the county to see if there are some more equitable ways of handling the transport going forward. And I think it's also important to realize that the county is getting ready to go through some very difficult discussions on their own with regard to EMS and what direction that's taken. So we think it's a good idea to pause this for this year and see what we can negotiate with the county that would be more advantageous for the city. Deltona Water Administration and Office Assistant part-time, that was not done. And then in the Stormwater Division, 4 Public Works Technicians, that was not approved. Part of that was taking over, the potential of taking over Providence, but the reality is we already do a lot of maintenance out there because even though it's a county road, because there's city properties on both sides of the road, we are responsible for maintaining the medians and the area to the side. And also we feel like that with the exercise we're going through on more efficiency with mowing, that this would be too early to fill the position without knowing what efficiency we can achieve. So that's it for here. If you have any questions.
Commissioner Bradford has a question.
Right, I don't know if you want me to ask this now or when we go over it, but the positions for the fire. One thing I noted reading through the budget, we had $600,000 in overtime. So when I see $600,000 in overtime and then I see that I have a chief requesting personnel, we've also had an influx of new homes. And I guess my concern goes to public safety. But what you're saying is these 6 firefighters aren't firefighters, they were only paramedics, or would they be doing both? It's a little different. I'm used to staff coming up here and asking them questions directly. So when it comes to this here, I guess it just gets a little concerning because for years I've been asking about overtime, and I'm told next year it's going to go down, next year it's going to go down, next year it's going to go down. And they keep putting hiring positions off, and they've been putting certain positions off, and then one year we actually got firefighters that we should have got 2 years prior. So we're still playing catch up. And I understand during COVID, we did have a lot of instances, everything's blamed on COVID now, but when somebody's off, then somebody else has to pick up those hours, and that goes into overtime. What I like to see is this overtime hours, that those numbers need to go down. And for overtime hours to go down, we need personnel.
Well, I would tell you that last year, the overtime in the fire department was approximately $500,000. This year, we are on course to have $900,000 worth of overtime. When we took a good hard dive into why, and reviewed it with the chiefs. We have a number of people on worker comp. We have people on FMLA. We now are hiring paramedics first and training them to be in fire because it's easier to hire paramedics first from a training standpoint. The problem is, from a training standpoint for the firefighters, it is a defined schedule. So it is very likely, well, no, it's certain, that someone who is employed here and has to go through the firefighter training process, they will have times that they have to come in on overtime to take the class. While on one hand we're confident that we can get the number back down to $500,000, we're also aware of the fact that the training of, because of the new hiring processes, the training of the firefighters is going to create a significant amount of overtime in order to get them trained. And I would also point out that part of the reason we have gone to hiring paramedics first is the same issue that everyone's having, that is finding certified firefighters. The chief and his staff, I believe rightfully so, have determined it's best to hire people with a paramedic background and train them to be firefighters. That way we can be fully staffed as opposed to continually looking for certified firefighters.
Okay, because I guess part of my question was going to be, are we utilizing Seminole County's training center? Because I know like they had recent graduations too. So have we looked into, with the addition of all the new homes, the need of another fire station? Have we done the analysis to determine where we're at in our residents versus our public safety?
As part of the accreditation project, we're doing a standard of care, or I think that's what it's called, analysis to determine if our fire stations are in the right place, are response times appropriate, is our staffing appropriate. That is ongoing as we speak. You will note that in the budget, when we get there, we're showing a new fire station. In the budget, we're showing it being financed over time instead of a one-time, $7.5 million cost or whatever it was, because we do fully expect that we will either need a new station or we will need to move an existing station to get better standard of coverage. Standard of coverage, what I meant to say. So that is an ongoing process, and we are working through that as part of the accreditation process.
I'll finish questions during firefighters when we get there. Thank you.
Pardon me?
I'll finish when we get to the firefighter section. That way we can keep moving.
Yeah.
Can I ask a favor? Mr.
Yeah.
Sosa, can you move your nameplate for me?
His?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I keep seeing your.
Yeah, your mouth, I lip read a lot, and your mouth is right behind it.
Yeah, move it that way a little bit. Yeah. There you go.
Thank you.
No, I said I can cover some of these questions. We can cover those when we cover the firefighters.
One more
Okay.
time.
We'll cover it when we hit the firefighter section.
Fire and rescue is the last item tonight, so she's going to address it then.
We'll address it when we get to
Okay.
the fire.
So we're done with the personnel requests, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, now we'll move on to tab number 3, City Commission proposed budget.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you going to go through, commissioners, if you have any questions on this, on any of these items, please feel free to ask Mr. Peters. Mr. Peters, if you would highlight any, if there's any highlights, please let us know.
Well,
If
according...
not, commissioners, if you have questions, just click on your button.
All right, just very quickly, the personnel line is slightly higher. The way the charter reads is your salaries are based on the average of the other cities in the county. We noticed some of them have been adjusted up, so therefore there will be a slight increase in y'all's salary for next year based on that formula. And that's pretty much it.
Any questions on the commission budget? Moving on, tab number 4, city manager budget.
I'm going straight over to the budget line.
It looks
You
like
will
your
see-
operating expenses went down from last year.
Yes, ma'am. The salary is pretty flat, and the allocation to IT is slightly increased. So overall, we actually have $60,000 less than last year's budget for the city manager's office. Any questions?
No questions. We'll move on to the city clerk's budget, which is tab 5.
As you would see, the budget personnel line is consistent with a 3% increase. Operating is actually less. The overall budget is slightly above last year's.
Okay. Any questions on that? If not, tab 6, finance. Any comments or questions on that?
The finance department is leading the way in the city with a fairly significant reduction in personnel costs, and their overall budget is approximately $240,000 less than last year. Some of this is related to a new director, a new deputy director, and some other staff that are at a lower pay rate than their predecessors.
No questions. Next up, tab 7, city attorney budget.
Mr. Fowler, you want to take this one? I'm not defending you.
Happy to answer any questions the commission may have. Excuse me.
Any questions, commissioners?
Madam Mayor, if I can on that one.
I don't have any questions on this item, so let's move on, or we're just going to get bogged down in the weeds for every one of these, time-wise, because we have some juicy ones coming up that are going to take time. Human Resources, tab 8. No questions?
Yeah, I've
Yes,
got
sir.
a question on that one. Are you looking, I remember last year we had a breakdown of how many staff were in each department, and then if you were, just moving staff over. Why is the operating expense going up almost $200,000 for that department, for human resources?
Mr. Sargent, as we were talking about before with regard to filling positions, one of the things that has been a real hurdle for us is in the area of fingerprinting. As it is right now, they have to make appointments to go to the sheriff's department to have the fingerprints done. We are in the process of acquiring a fingerprint machine and a fingerprinting service that will help us be more expeditious in that process. I know, for instance, when I was hired, it was about 3 weeks between the time they said, we like you once you come on board, until I could get a fingerprint. And 3 weeks is a lot of time, and sometimes people end up taking another job. So it's an area that we felt like we could be far more efficient. And so part of that is the fingerprinting machine. And if I'm not mistaken, and you all can correct me, but I think it also includes an allocation for outside legal counsel to help out with HR matters. We have found that that was very helpful in this last year, dealing with several internal investigations and the like. So we have included some additional funding for that purpose.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for HR? Moving on to IT, tab 9. Something we all need and few of us understand in depth. Let's see, Commissioner Bradford.
Well, I was excited to see the fiber initiative and our road conduit. How far are we taking that? Because 100,000 seems extremely low, but I would love to see this a lot more.
So the fiber projects for the city have been going on for a few number of fiscal years right now. So we've been mostly focusing on areas between site to sites and that we can reach that are within reason, distance-wise. So we've gone pretty much all the way to Deltona Water. Our pain points right now are in Eastern Plan on that side of the city and going down Howland. So we're trying to partner with the county, I'm sorry, to run fiber down Howland when we can. And we have some initiatives going that right now. They're doing a project right now from Providence to Elkham.
Awesome.
They're going to allow us to piggyback and add fiber to the conduit there. That'll help us reduce costs and get there as well.
Do they have grants out there? Because I thought somebody had told me a while back that there was actually grants to get, more fiber brought into the city. Because they say that is actually a good pull. Like a lot of people look forward to having that, especially when you've got businesses coming in. So that's a big part of, businesses when they look at infrastructure, because they have to focus on that IT department as well for their point of sales and all those. So have we looked at any grants to speed up, no pun intended, that fiber initiative?
Yeah, I've researched grants, and I'm always keeping my eye out for any new grants that come in for telecommunications and even security, because I can sometimes piggyback onto that as well. I think we can start leveraging maybe some of the partnerships with the new businesses that are coming in. We have a lot of telecommunications companies that are coming in, and it needs to be fiscally responsible to do it. Sometimes running fiber a great distance just doesn't make any sense. I don't get a return on my investment for quite a number of years, and it doesn't make any sense at that point. But by partnering with other companies and that are already going to run fiber out there, we might be able to leverage that relationship.
Right, because I know the first thing we think of is public works,
Yes.
but they don't think of, we got to start thinking of the other side of it as well, which is, this fiber initiative that's going to be big here in the future, a lot bigger than it is right now. So,
and that money is mostly for anytime we open a road up. I want to be able to drop some conduit and some fiber in that road and use it for future use if we need to.
Awesome, thank you.
Commissioner McCool?
Can we talk about the website? We briefly broached it, but our website, can we talk about that? New and improved, different city format, what's up with that?
That'd be a different department, but if you want, do you want to broach that during
We'll
that?
take,
Sorry, IT to me is IT.
Mr. Cole, if we can take care of that when we get to that particular part of the budget.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
John, he's in city manager budget, so maybe we should circle back with Lee
Okay.
then?
Come on up, Lee.
Sorry, I'm just.
Lee Lopez, Public Information Officer. We have $130,000 budgeted for a web redesign. We're looking at, do we start from ground zero and build it back up, or do we take the existing structure that we have and improve it? So we have money set aside for it.
Time frame?
That's a good one. It depends on how deeply we need to do the repairs. Do we start all over again? Or can we really work on what we have and just make it better?
Okay.
I know it's not very precise. We are working with Civic Plus. They are our current provider. They have different templates that we are looking at to see if we can do a plug and play. Or do we want to try to see about creating something that's specific for us?
Yeah, we did the park survey, which was fantastic, and knowing what people wanted and using the city website. Sometimes it's hard, so perhaps a public survey would help out with that, what's user-friendly. I'm just, that's all I have. I just want to know, because I've been asked if we were working on that
Yes, ma'am.
during this budget. Okay.
Ms. McCool?
Yes.
I will tell you that the standard that we're going to be using is the 3-click rule, that you should be able to find anything on our website within 3 clicks.
Okay.
And part of that is, design of drop-down menus and the like. So that's generally the rule of what makes a good website, is the 3-click rule.
Oh, I'm down.
Commissioner Bradford?
Quick question, wasn't that in last year's budget? That was last year's budget item. That's not a this year budget item, right? That's going to be a carryover? Because I'm pretty sure we had that as part of the 21-22 budget.
It was discussed, but there was never money put aside for it.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions for IT? If not, we will move on to tab 10, law enforcement.
Ma'am, if I can do a real quick synopsis here.
Yes.
I want to do a shout out to the Sheriff's Department. You will notice that their budget is basically flatline. I'd like to say the staff is incredible negotiators and the like, but it wasn't even necessary. But I think what's real important here, because a lot of people talk about having our own police department. When you do a comparison, it is costing us about $126 per resident to provide police to the city. By comparison, for our peer cities in Volusia County, the lowest in our peer cities is $250 per resident. So one half of that, with the high being Daytona Beach Shores, which is $1,250 per resident. So the Sheriff's Department is providing value-added services to the city of Deltona.
Okay, thank you. For the shores, does that include, because they're all inclusive, they're all cross-trained, does that include fire? I mean, for shores is all, I mean, that example, every one of them are cross-trained for fire, police, paramedics, so. Okay, any questions on law enforcement? None? We will move on to the next. Tab 11, Fire Rescue. Yes.
I'm sorry, this is law enforcement. I've got to ask this question.
Don't leave.
It's so close. I heard a rumor with other cities that this number's going down.
I'll defer to our financial advisor.
Good evening, council members. Renfeng Sheriff's Office. Yes, the county has commissioned a study about how to allocate and determine the cost of contract law enforcement within Volusia County. That study is still going on, and the county is still in the final stages of accepting recommendations on which version of the recommendation to take. So before too long, they will be doing a public presentation to the county council on which version of the contract flavors to accept and to use. But for budget planning purposes, the sheriff has already agreed for fiscal year 23 to keep all the city contract levels at current level. So there are some different versions, different discussions, but that study has not been finalized yet.
Okay. But, you know, and just so everybody understands, this is not a change in our level of service. We're not losing anything. We're just, level of service stays the same. And as of right now, the cost is staying the same.
Correct.
Okay. I want to make sure people, I just have to ask that because it's going to be, I know we're going to be questioned on what are we taking away, because it doesn't usually happen where you guys stay the same. So I'm excited about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And basically, that's somewhat due to Amendment 10, correct? Okay. Anything else on law enforcement? Then we will move to Fire Rescue. Okay, tab 11. Questions, commissioners? Sorry, Commissioner Bradford.
I got to go back to this. So we've just been waiting, and I believe we had a few years back said that we were going to get, and I think it was prior to Mr. Peters, the additional firefighters. Were those individuals hired? I know there was a budget a couple years ago. Chief where we put it off and put it off and put it off, and then it was kind of like, no, I'm going to be able to hold off this year and then next year, but then it was like, but then I'm going to need them. So now we're back to, I guess the way I feel is over the last 6 years, when you've been straight up asked, do you need individuals, you're like, I can deal without. And when I see you come up saying, I need personnel, that makes me go, this guy needs personnel.
Yeah,
I hear the trucks, I hear this, I mean, I know you guys are slammed. I just can't see that withholding this is going to do us more good than harm.
Yeah, we, going back, I think 3 or 4 years ago, they made a plan, it was either 3 or 4 or 3.
It was 4 or 5,
like
actually.
That, yeah.
It was a high number.
So they agreed to hire 9 firefighters over a 3-year period. It actually took a 4-year period, but we did hire those 9 firefighters, and that's what we ended up putting that second ambulance in service with.
And you really feel that you could go without the personnel for another 12 months? With the call volume the way it is right now, with COVID still rearing up its ugly head, you really feel that you can go without the personnel?
The 6 people that we put in for was to add an additional ambulance. So if we're going to hold off on that, and like Mr. Peters said, that when the county came to us, they wanted to put it over in 64's area, which is our absolute slowest area. So the revenue that we would get out of that would not be anywhere near, say, if we put it over at Station 62. So when we were looking at budget, we wasn't sure whether we were going to move forward with a transport unit or not. So I put the 6 people in just in case we were going to. But from what Mr. Peters has been telling me as well, he's been dealing with the county manager, and I guess there's some stuff going on, and they kind of want to wait and see what happens with that, to where either we would come back later in the year or next year to try to reevaluate whether or not we put that 3rd ambulance in service.
So the 6 people, or let's hypothetically say, so if you hire a few individuals, would those individuals be able to float through departments to help reduce overtime? Because I guess what I'm looking at right here is it says the actual overtime was $611,000, which is $111,000 over the budget of $500 for fiscal year 21-22.
Yeah, so we typically do what we call overhire, and it sounds like we got a whole bunch of people, which we really don't. We have a minimum staffing of 20, and we have 26 assigned to each shift. So that gives us 6 personnel to kind of cover those slots and stuff like that. 5 of those slots can be dedicated to vacation, and then that extra 6 slot takes care of either sick or FMLA or workman's comp and stuff like that. This past year, we had a significant amount of people that were out on workman's comp and FMLA, as well as we were short, I think it was up to 5 people at one time. So with that combination, as well as with COVID, and I don't want to try to blame everything on COVID because that wasn't the case, but when we do have those COVID spikes, our issue is when I have one person go out on a COVID spike, they tend to go back 48 hours to see who that person was around, and we work 24, 48-hour shifts. So when I lose 1, I lose 3. So, and if I lose 2, I got 6 out. I get 3, that's 9 out, typically. So we had several instances where there was anywhere from 6 to 9, 10 people out at a time during those COVID spikes. So between all of that, that was kind of a perfect storm, I guess you want to say, that caused some of that overtime. Now, going forward, that's not anything I can predict. I can't predict people being out. I can't predict COVID spikes. We just had another one, where I had quite a few people out here just this month, so this month or last month. So that's kind of where the overtime thing is coming from, is since we can't predict that, since we don't know what's going on with COVID, we just want to be prepared in case, we have those issues again.
Correct, and you're no longer short the 5 people, correct?
No, I'm only short 1 right now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner McCool?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, could you just, for clarity's sake for me, because of concern, for staffing, we want you to have what you have. You've reported what you've reported. Can you just, in a percentage-wise, FMLA, is that COVID-related? Most of that, what percentage of that is COVID-related?
I really can't give you an exact percentage, but FMLA can be, anytime anybody is out, per se, it counts towards FMLA time. So if they're out for COVID, that counts towards their FMLA time. If they are sick or injured off duty, that kind of stuff also counts towards FMLA. When they're out on workman's comp, that also counts towards their workman's comp, their FMLA time. Now it's covered under workman's comp, whereas if they're injured off duty, it's covered by, sick leave and stuff. But
so that's not two separate things, comp and FMLA, like all FMLA, okay, is not comp related, but all comp related is FMLA related?
Yes, ma'am, I believe so, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, that's correct. So in other words, somebody has a child and they're out for, 6, 8, 12 weeks, whatever FMLA will allow them to be out, whatever they need to be out, that would be covered under FMLA, but it would not be a workman's comp situation.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get to is what I guess percentage is of temporary nature and what is a long-term issue that we have, so that, you know what I mean? We know how to adjust the sales.
Well, another long-term issue that we have is I have one person that's out on military leave right now. He's been out since November, and he's in the Army Reserve, or one of the reserves. I'm not sure if it's Army, but one of the reserves. And we've lost him for about a year. So he's projected to be back this November.
Yeah.
So,
thank you for his service, whoever that is.
Yeah.
But again, just asking these questions, I know that you know your people and staff levels, right?
Right.
But for my constituents, right, wanting them protected, and while at the same time spending money, I don't want there to be any lapse in protection for our residents. That's why I'm asking these, so I can answer my constituents, looking them in the eye to make sure that we
do have that minimum staffing of 20. We never go below that for any significant amount of time. If we're down to minimum staffing of 20 and somebody has to go home, we might be down below it for a couple hours until we get somebody else in or something along those lines. But for the most part, we are never below that minimum staffing of 20.
Do you project that this year, for you and your experience, do you project that this year, is there a variance in the percentage out from when we talked about so many being out from COVID? Is there a percentage that you feel like that will dissipate, like drop by, I guess is what I'm saying? Do you think there would be more or less? I mean.
Yeah, the COVID is really undeterminable. I really can't, anything like that. So, and then the workman's comp, it really depends on what the injury is. Somebody twists an ankle, they're out for 2-3 weeks, maybe a month, trying to get into workman's comp doctors and stuff like that is also difficult. But somebody injures a back, now that person might be out for an extended period of time. So it really depends on what the injury is versus, how quickly we can get them into a physician and things like that.
And this is going to directly correlate with that overtime cost, right? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything other than these two things that would affect overtime? Is there radical training going to be happening or anything like that? Or is it mostly all the overtime due to the FMLA and comp issues?
We do use overtime from time to time to bring people in to do training. If we have, or even some of our programs like CPR and things like that, if we don't have people that are on duty that can teach that, we'll bring somebody in to do that. But I don't believe that's a significant factor in the overtime issue that we had this year.
And please know this, that again, speaking, I want our residents covered, but we ask these questions and we do it every year. So, thank you for providing this information. That's all I have, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner King.
Chief, I got a question. Do your employees get sick time?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then I don't understand. You just said that if they take sick time, that counts as FMLA.
If
You're
they
on sick
take,
time, you're on sick time. If you're on FMLA, that's different.
so sick time is sick, if you just take a day off sick, it doesn't count towards FMLA. But if you are out for a significant amount of time, say you have an off-duty injury, say you hurt your ankle and you're going to be out for a month, after, I think it's 3 shifts, you start collecting that FMLA, or you start getting charged FMLA. What FMLA does, it's not really a benefit per se that, like sick leave, you're going to get your normal paycheck because you're using sick leave. What FMLA does is it protects your job. So so you get 12 weeks every year that you can be out on and charge to FMLA, and the city has to hold your job. If you go 13 weeks, then they don't have to hold your job. Is that correct? Am I correct there? So if you're out and you're going to get paid through your sick leave, but they also count that time off as FMLA as well. Once you get past that 3 days, I think it is.
If I get sick and I go on sick leave, and on the 4th day, I'm still sick, does FMLA kick in at the beginning of my sick time? Or does it kick in on the 4th day?
Commissioner King, Ms. Welk is going to answer that for you.
It would depend on the certification from the doctor. So we're obligated to offer FMLA to employees. The employees then take that to their provider. And if their FMLA is approved, we base it on the date in which the provider certified that this person is eligible for FMLA. So
And it
it
starts
could
on
go
the
back.
1st day of their sick time.
Yeah, it could go back. Mhm.
So do they lose those 3 sick days if they go on FMLA?
I guess I'm not really sure what you're asking.
You understand what I'm
because-
saying?
Not really, because FMLA is just, it's the way in which the leave has to be coded. It's protected leave so that a person cannot be disciplined for any issue that's related to that leave. But the city isn't, no one's really obligated, no employer is obligated to provide someone with payment for that leave, but we do if they have the sick leave. So the time is coded on the timesheet as FMLA, and if the individual has sick leave available to them, then they would be able to use that. If they're on workers' comp insurance covers for their salary while they're out, but we're still coding that as FMLA because it's FMLA eligible.
Okay. I'll have to have that conversation some other time because I don't think we're going anywhere here. What I'm really wanting to know is, how many sick days does a firefighter get a year?
7?
Depends on if they get 7 hours.
What is it?
I believe they get 7 shifts a year. They get 7 hours of pay period. So 7 hours times 26 divided by 24. I believe it's 7 shifts a year.
Okay.
I believe.
Well, what I'm asking is, if somebody goes out sick and they use 3 sick days, that reduces their sick leave by 3 days.
Yes.
But if they go 4 days or more and FMLA kicks in, when the FMLA kicks in, does that negate the sick days? Or do
No.
they still lose those days?
They still lose those days because it's the sick leave that pays them. The FMLA merely just protects their job from leaving. So
Okay.
the FMLA is not a
All right.
monetary pay benefit.
Okay.
It's a,
Yeah, I was just trying to understand that because when you say FMLA, if they go on sick time, they get FMLA. They don't really get FMLA unless they have to make sure their job's secure, which means that they got to go more than 3 days sick.
yeah. After 3 days, they're required to see their doctor and get a note for FMLA. Yes, sir.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Just for clarifications for myself. So FMLA is similar to what we would call short-term disability and long-term disability?
No, all FMLA does is it from what I understand and protect, if I'm wrong here, all it really does is protect your job.
Right, and that's what short-term disability does.
Well, short-term disability would also pay you.
Yes.
Right.
You know, so that would be a monetary benefit. There's no monetary benefit to FMLA. It merely protects your job for X amount, for 12 weeks a year. So your sick leave would be a monetary benefit. If you're off sick for a month, then your sick leave would cover your monetary benefit, so you would get your normal paycheck just like you would if you were at work. The FMLA makes sure that they can't say, well, you're going to be out a month, so you're going to be fired. You can't do that.
Thank you.
It's basically a job holder. Correct. You're not allowed to fire somebody if they're out on FMLA.
Correct.
Madam Mayor,
yes.
If I can jump in on this one. One of the most difficult decisions that a city manager has to make is you have somebody that's coming off of FMLA, but they haven't been cleared by the doctor. And you have no idea when the doctor will clear them. At some point, we may have to medically separate from an employee. But as long as they're on FMLA, their job is protected. But once FMLA is exhausted, and assuming the doctor cannot provide any idea when they can come back, we have to make a decision as to whether to medically separate from that employee.
No more questions that I can see here, sir, but I just went through the previous budget books, and I looked up, because is there, in the collective bargaining agreement, is there a certain amount of guaranteed overtime?
There's...
That actually is a line item for overtime that would classify as. I'm not, and I'm just, you don't have to answer it now if you don't know, that's okay. Because I just went back and I looked over the previous years of overtime, the actual, and then up to what we budgeted. So the actual overtime in 16-17 was $729,273. In 17-18, it was $541,195. This is all out of the budget books. In 18-19, $515,400 was budgeted, but we only paid $347,249. In 19-20, the $387 was budgeted, but we paid $298,282. And in 2021, $385,000, and then we're budgeting $500,000 now.
Yes.
So does that sound about right? I mean, and I know that the bigger amount was when we put personnel in there, we were able to reduce that huge amount down. Am I right?
Madam Mayor, typical employee annually works 2,080 hours. In the fire department, because they had the guaranteed overtime, their actually work hours, I believe, are 2,960.
I believe it's 2912 or
2912. I was close.
Yeah.
So, you know, that 2912 is guaranteed overtime from 2080 to 2912. The overtime you're looking at in the overtime budget, it's actual overtime beyond the 2912.
Yeah, so a firefighter works 56 hours a week, 53 of that is straight time, 3 of that is overtime, and that overtime, that that overtime is built into the salaries.
Okay, so that's I guess what I should have meant.
Yes.
That is already in the salary, but this is, so I'm just looking at the fluctuating overtime, and we did do a good job of bringing it down.
Yeah, when I first
according to the budget, according to our official budget books.
Yeah, when I first got here, that was one of the things they asked me to do, so I started working on trying to find ways to bring down the overtime. So some of the things that I did is, I use on-duty people to cover events and things like that. Before I got here, we have a football game. It was covered with overtime. Now we have a football game. We cover it with an on-duty shift. And if we have a second football game, we cover that with overtime. So those are some examples. There was also some other things I can't think of right off the top of my head.
Well, I mean, the thing is, we've done a good job of keeping it in check up until COVID, and you can't.
Yeah, and then the other thing too is we added an extra vacation slot, so that we used to have two extra slots above my minimum staffing. Now we've only got the one extra slot, so that contributed a little bit to COVID, quite a bit. And then we had those slots that we were missing too during that first 6 months of this year that really contributed, as well as the workman's comp.
Well, thank you, Chief. The one thing I want to make sure that we do is get that transport vehicle. We have to have that. It's in the budget. Am I correct, sir, that we do not chop that at all?
Yes, ma'am. And just some semi-good news. We were supposed to have our transport vehicle by Friday, but they found some paint flaws in it. So they backed it up a week. We should have, finally, after 18 months, we should have the transport unit that we bought all the way back in January of 21, I believe. We should, yeah, January of 21, I think, is when we ordered it. We should have that sometime this week, hopefully.
Can we do a ribbon cutting for it or some sort of a yay that we got it?
Yeah.
Drive it by here or something?
Yeah. We usually do what we call a vehicle push-in for when we get new vehicles and stuff like that, typically for fire trucks, but we may do something like that.
We can do it for this one. It's been a long time coming.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Chief. So that, I think, wraps up all of our things for this evening. So we have made it through, and 5 minutes to spare, give or take. Mr. Peters, can you pretty much enlighten us on tomorrow and just give us a quick overview what we have going on? Looks like construction code and park and rec and park projects, the center, general government, and the municipal complex. Is there anything that we need to do our homework on before tomorrow, sir?
Obviously, the next 5 tabs in your budget books, what we will be talking about tomorrow. I fully expect that there will be some discussion under planning services, the moratorium effort, and the efforts with regard to putting in place the rental ordinance.
And that will be under general government and municipal complex?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then Parks and Recreation, obviously based on earlier conversation tonight, I expect we'll have a lively discussion.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We appreciate everything. Joyce, we're good? Okay. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. 7:28, we are adjourned.
3 minutes early.
Well, that wasn't too bad. No. 2 hours, right, Ed?
No.